Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our webinar on mental and financial costs of poor well-being. Thank you for bearing with us. Technical difficulties, you know how it goes. But I'm happy to be joined by Jeannie Newfer, who's with a financial advisor with Edward Jones, and Dr. Olivia Skalski, a clinical psychologist. And we're going to talk about financial health and mental health, the intersection of the two. I'll let each of them kind of give a little bit more of their background. Jeannie, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. I'm a financial advisor with Edward Jones in East Hampton, Connecticut. I've actually been an advisor since 2001. So I've been through a number of volatile markets, and I am also on a mental health board uh, corporation for mental health services. So this is something near and dear to my heart.
Awesome. Dr. Skalski.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Olivia Skalski. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I've been in the field for 10 years. I'm in the Massachusetts area. I work with treating individuals with severe mental illness and different psychosocial life stressors. I also am a supervisor, senior director, and consultant and with LAMCO Wellness, and happy to be here.
We're happy to have you both, and thank you to everybody for joining us. Um, so before we get started, I have some questions that I wanted to ask both of you about this. Um, but I I wanted to kind of give some background because from my own perspective, I think a lot of people, and Jeannie, you can you can attest to this, I think a little bit more than I can. They tend to approach finances and financial advisors like, okay, make me money. And in my experience, it's a lot more nuanced and it's not quite that simple. It's really about, okay, can we put together something that you're comfortable with? And different people's comfort level is different. And I remember when I first started my career, I was going to be a financial advisor, and one of the things that I found immediately was that for me, a lot of the struggle was not getting people to invest with me. It's getting people to invest wisely. And I always related that to a well-being issue. They're feeling emotional about their investments, which I understand it's money. And they might be prone to rash action. So that's for me, that's why this is so important, is because so much of this comes from a place of mental well-being. Um, yeah, I don't know if either of you had anything to contribute, but I just wanted to give that background before we got into things.
Yeah,
Well,
I think it's all related. It's all related in different domains, I feel like. So if you feel mentally well, you make better decisions. That probably impacts your financial decisions. So I think it's all interrelated, interconnected, and getting support for each domain of your life is useful too.
correct. And especially in this environment right now, people tend to be more emotional. The news media really blows a lot of things out of proportion. So when a client comes in looking for something, you have to kind of, go through and say, okay, where are you at? What do you need? Where do you want to be? What are we going to do to get you there? And how are we going to stay there? So we want to work with them very calmly. If I get a client that calls me and says, oh my God, I want to take out this much money, I just want to put it in cash because I heard on the news ABC and I think it's a bad idea. So I ask them questions like, okay, is this money you're going to need in the near term? Because, stuff happens, something's coming up, and they're like, oh my God, I might need X amount of dollars within 6 months because this happened. Well, that's different. That's not necessarily an emotional decision, that's a need decision. Or I get people on the other side of the coin where, oh, I heard this. This is really great. I want to put all my money in ABC. And you have to say, okay, what about diversification? You need to be invested properly. You need to have all your areas covered. And again, based on your goals, where you want to be, And what are you going to do? So I try very hard, to keep them realistic. And they're not going to make $1 million overnight. I never promised them anything. I promised them to do what's best for them and do right by them. If they seem to be getting derailed for whatever reason, we sit, we have a conversation. I try and figure out, okay, is there something really emotional going on with the person? Is there something going on in their life? And then sometimes they'll come out with, oh my God, my son's going through a really hard time. Um, he's in debt to this and he made some bad decisions. I really think I need to just take this money out of my account and give it to my son. And I'm like, okay. And is this what you're doing going to really help him out? What is it going to do to you? So I try and get them to look at the whole picture, and I'm not saying this actually happened. I'm making up like an example because it could happen, you know, different reasons, but you always want to try and keep them even keeled, keep them calm, and keep everything realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. It like I said, in my opinion, it's very much a mental and financial uh work versus just one or the other. I did have a few questions that I wanted to get started with for both of you. The first one being, where do financial stress and emotional stress most often intersect for your clients? And how do you feel like mental health and financial health professionals can collaborate to reduce unnecessary harm? Because I do feel like a lot of professionals, or not a lot of professionals, but a lot of clients are going to one or the other, and not necessarily kind of getting the collaborative view from both points.
Yeah, I think for me, for with patients that I work with on the mental health side, I think when people get stressed, they tend to avoid things. I think sometimes that is people's go-to, where they avoid looking at bills, they avoid talking about their problems, they get anxious when they think about money problems. And every time you avoid something, it increases the anxiety even more. So working with a financial advisor, working with a therapist, or just talking about it and trying to destigmatize financial worries, I think could be really useful. I think, as we said, financial stress impacts different domains like relationships, friendships, families, daily life. And it kind of creates this negative feedback loop where it could perpetuate shame or makes patients feel like they're not able to go buy things that maybe like their friends could buy, or it could lead to this embarrassment. So they feel shame for spending, or they feel bad about themselves, or they tie their self-worth to spending. So I think mental health and emotional stress work together, and you can help you with different domains of life. You can kind of create a saving spending structure, or be transparent with yourself and try to learn more about what you don't know. I think for me, knowledge is power. So the more you talk to a financial advisor, the more you talk about money or your emotional stress, I think it can help you feel more in control.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a certified psychologist. I don't have any degrees in that area. So, I'm always sticking to the investment side. But if I see a client that looks like they're really in mental distress, or or even declining, like Alzheimer's or something like that, because that can also be issues as well. We have protocols in place. We have people that we can call and contact and find out where to go from there. So we're always making sure that when we are having these conversations with our clients, that their mental health is in the right place. Because when it's not, they will make bad decisions, and those bad decisions could be very detrimental to their portfolio. For instance, in 2007, when we had the big Lehman Brothers crash, if you will, I mean, the market was just dropping. I mean, there were days where it was dropping 1,000, 2,000 points. And in 2007, that was like a crash. And, we had people calling, and, we had to talk them off the cliff and say, okay, when do you need this money? What's going on? the majority of them listened to me, stayed the course. They were absolutely fine and made out quite well. But there were others that they just couldn't handle it, and they just took everything out, locked in all the losses, and once those losses are locked in, you can't get them back. And they lost all those investing years by pulling out. So you have to look at all of the things that are going on at the time, what's going on in their lives, to try and help them, do the right thing. And if they need help, use the protocols that are in place to get them the help that they need. If they ask you if you know of anyone, then I would obviously give them a referral to a company like yours, or if I had a name that someone I know used, I would give them that information. But I can't say you need to go see this person or you need to go see that person, because that's not my job. I'm the financial professional, not the mental health professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a shameless self plug, I do think that that's an important part of the process, is recognizing that, and I can attest, I do this too. Once once you have a relationship of trust with any professional, um, I feel like it's natural to just extend that trust beyond their individual realms. Um, and I think that's why, hopefully on the client end, we can catch ourselves doing that and say, "Oh, I'm kind of asking somebody to do something that isn't necessarily their job or their expertise." But I think also on the professional end, it's a really good idea to have these collaborative discussions like we're having now, to have these relationships where you can say, "Oh, you know what? This isn't really me. I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction, but you know, Jeannie at Edward Jones, let me give you her information. She can really help you out." Or Olivia at LAMCO Wellness, let me give you her information. She can really help you out. And I think that, personally, I think that those networks are beneficial, because I can say that um, a client isn't going to go any further than they feel like going, unless you make it easy for them. So, uh, but to tie into the slides that we're posting up, and thank you to our producers for working on this. I think that as an individual, it's very easy to look at things like mental health, like financial health, in a vacuum, and kind of say, I get up every day, and more than 50% of the days I'm not miserable. I'm feeling good. Or I get up every day and I can pay my bills, so I'm feeling good. Um, and the reality is that's not how life works. It's all tied together. You get up every day and you're feeling good 50% of the day. What are you doing the other 50% of the day where you're not feeling good? Are you making rash decisions? Are those decisions impacting your finances? You get up every day and you're able to pay your bills and eat and everything, and that's great. But are you in a place where if your car breaks down, you're not freaking out for a week and a half while you're trying to get it fixed because now your whole life is upended? Like, those are things that I think a lot of times we don't tend to think about, but they're very real things and they are interconnected. So I did want to move on to another question, because I think that kind of the personal answers have so much more of an impact for me personally. But I did want to ask, what misconceptions do you see clients commonly having about therapy or setting a financial strategy when they're coming to you for guidance? And how do you feel like those misconceptions can affect the outcome?
I think it can affect it big time. I mean, I've had clients come in and say, "Oh, I was invested in 2007 and the advisor lost all my money. I lost everything." So they already have the concept that they're going to lose because they lost then. So then you have to go through and say, "Okay, well, what did you do? what happened. So you kind of have to get that whole background picture. You can't just jump into and say, oh, I'm going to be so much better and I'm going to do ABC. You need to find out what the root of that problem was to start with. And once you figure that piece out, then you can go forward with something else. But if they come in already with the wrong state of mind, you're not going to be able to help them. You need to find out what's really going on with him before you can go forward with anything.
Yeah, I appreciate that approach. I think I take a similar approach in my work as well. I love that, where if they believe it will work, the outcomes will be better too with therapy, where it's like, if you believe in it, you invest in yourself, you invest in the treatment or the services or the support, I think you tend to have better outcomes. And I think for the misconceptions, at least with clients, I've heard in my experience, where there's still this stigma here with some mental health, where it's something's like wrong with you or something's wrong with your behavior, and they worry others might judge them, whether it's someone that they're seeking help from. But really, I can speak to the therapy side. We're very non-judgmental, very non-shaming. This is a safe space to embrace your strengths. Come see us. Therapists want to help develop your skills and enhance your abilities and accomplish your goals with you. It's very collaborative. And I think the main kind of advice or, recommendation I would give here too is, if you're worried about starting, finding the best match for you in a therapist or in someone to help support you is so key. And that's what they say in the research and in the literature, where the research suggests the most predictive factor in determining the therapy success and the outcome, if it's going to be good or not, is this key factor of the therapeutic relationship. So it's kind of shopping around, trying to find a good therapist that you really connect with will be a predictive factor in if you're going to be successful or not, and really finding someone you feel comfortable with. Again, we're looking for themes of safety, non-judgment. If you want to join a group therapy or individual therapy, there's so many different options. And of course, there's always privacy, confidentiality, if you're worried about stigma, things like that. So that's what I've heard in my work so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to speak to that and contribute, I think a lot of it is that as individuals, and I can say that I've done this as well, we don't understand how important setting ourselves up for success is. And I think, I was talking about it before, where a lot of people will approach financial advisors and go, okay, make me money. Which, I mean, great. But let's be honest, if there was a magic button and you could do that, everybody would be a financial advisor. And I think that we tend to do that with finances, with mental health. Not the other day, it was like a month or two ago. I went to the gym. I was having a very bad day, and I went to the gym and I sat on a machine and I did nothing. Because I was supposed to go, like that was in my schedule. I was supposed to go to the gym at that time, but I hadn't set myself up for success, and I hadn't been realistic about like where I was at that moment, and was I ready to do the work that was necessary. And I think that a lot of times, and please feel free to correct me, both of you, if I'm wrong, but a lot of times as financial advisors and as mental health clinicians, you're kind of left to make up for somebody's bad day, make up for somebody who hasn't set themselves up for success. And I've seen, financial advisors and clinicians that are amazing at that. It truly amazes me how like together you guys are, in being able to be like, okay, well, this person's here and they're not really ready for this, but let's see what we can do to walk them down the path where they are. um, but on the flip side, I think the other side of it is that once that trust is built, there does tend to be this mentality in a client that says, okay, I trust you, I can trust you with everything, and you can do everything now. And then it's going back to me, to not just not setting themselves up for success, but also not setting you up for success, because they're asking you to fix an issue that's not in your training. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. Please go ahead.
Oh no, I think that's such a great point. I feel like what you're speaking to jump off that is like surviving versus thriving, where it's like maybe you're surviving just through day to day, like you're trying to get through things, and then we help clients to really thrive and to meet their goals and things like that. And if they are having a hard day, as a mental health provider, we definitely sit in that emotion with you on your journey. So we're not trying to like push you through your emotions too quickly. Like we don't mind, like if you're having a hard day and you come to us for a session, we can sit with you and process that with you. And I think too, it's really important, like we said, to meet people where they're at. And I've always been so blown away by my clients' resilience in life, where you're kind of speaking to issues that come up and problems that come up. People are so resilient. Even on their hardest day, they come in and see me and they're like, I'm feeling really low, like maybe finances isn't going well, or family or relationships. But just having someone there to bounce ideas off, like, you know, as a therapist or being a sounding board, or just someone, you know, my approach too is to point out people's strengths, very strengths-based, solution-focused approaches, which are different kind of evidence-based practices that we use as an orientation, theoretically, and for like a therapeutic orientation or framework. But I think pointing out people's strengths of like, hey, that, you know, you are doing this really well, or this part needs to be developed a little further. Let's work together. So emphasizing that collaboration, I think, is really useful, just so they don't feel alone in it. So if they are having a hard day or not noticing their own strengths, I think that could be useful, just to have somebody point out like, hey, you know, you're getting through it, like let's work together and I'm here for you.
Trust is a real big piece. I mean, I was in a trust department for many years, left and came to Edward Jones. I was amazed at the amount of clients that came to find me because they trusted me. And when I have new clients that come in, when they walk in the door, it's not like, okay, what do you want? This is what we're going to do. It's, all right, tell me what you're looking to achieve. Tell me what you want. Tell me what experiences you've had with maybe other advisors. Have you had a bad experience? Did something happen? So you need to know that background. And sometimes it's 2, 3, or even 4 appointments before we actually get a plan together for them, because you can't rush this process. You have to do it based on the client's need. And also, you need to make sure they're in the right mind and capacity to do what's being suggested. You don't want to overwhelm them.
Absolutely. And I think that that's so crucial. And like, so obviously, uh, doing this, you know, having a background in finance and then working in mental health, I do have friends and family that come to me and will ask me things that are well beyond my understanding or expertise, because I am neither a financial advisor or a clinician. But recently, one stuck out to me, and it was a family member that came to me, and they they had inherited some money, and they inherited the financial advisor from their inheritance. Um, and they were talking to me, and they were saying that they were kind of uncomfortable with it, because the financial advisor was basically like, okay, this is what we've done, and this is what we're going to keep doing. And didn't really talk to them about where they were at and what they needed, and their own financial journey. And they were like, so, you know, what do I do? And my immediate response was, get a new financial advisor. You know, there should always be this relationship of trust, that they understand you and are working in your best interest and what you're looking for, against, you know, hey, again, that mentality of, okay, they're making me money. Because for a lot of us, when we dig in, when we do the mental work, we kind of realize that money isn't the end goal that we're looking for. It's the facilitator for the end goal that we're looking for, you know. And actually, another random story, I had a family member tell me about someone that wanted to change up a family trust so that it was, you know, more making more revenue. But the purpose of the family trust wasn't to make revenue, it was to basically provide backup if anything really bad happens to the family. That was the whole purpose. Um, and we had to have this conversation of like, okay, well, you need to be looking at what do you want from this versus versus just making money. And I think, Jeannie, to your point, a good financial advisor is always going to ask that question. They're always going to find that out and create that trust. And it's the same on the mental health end with clinicians, that they're going to find out where you need to be and where you're at. And I think that's just so crucial as a client to be aware that, hey, if you're not feeling it, if you're not feeling the trust, like, go somewhere else. So I had another question for Jeannie. How do you help clients manage the emotional impact, especially in our current economy, which is so much fun for everybody, of rising inflation, healthcare costs, groceries, higher gas prices, just across the board, without letting the fear of everything that's going on drive their financial decisions into something like, say, hoarding toilet paper.
So I try and look at like where they're at. So number one, when they come in, I'll tell them, what's your budget right now? What has changed? How much has it gone up? What are your goals? When do you anticipate needing the funds that we have for you? When do you want to access these funds? Are there changes we can make? Like I have clients that make monthly contributions. Well, in some cases, we may have to cut those back a little bit to help fit the client's portfolio. But we also want to look at, years ago, I had a client that came in when I was at the bank. They couldn't manage their budget. So I asked them to bring in a budget sheet. We looked at everything and I said, well, do you go out to dinner or, oh yeah, maybe once a month. I said, do you ever buy coffee? She goes, oh yeah, I have to get my Dunkin' Donuts coffee every day. I said, every day, like 7 days a week. So, I mean, at the time, it was $2 a cup for the coffee. So I was like, okay, you are spending, $2 a day times 30 days. That's $60 a month. And in some cases, they were having 2 or 3 cups of coffee a day. I said, that right there is impacting your budget. So you have to look at those things and look at everything realistically. Is there something that you can cut out that you really don't need to make sure we're doing it correctly? But we also have to look at their mindset when they're coming in and doing this, like making sure they're not doing it emotionally. And if you think it's being done emotionally, you can always say, all right, we need to take a step back. Let's set up another appointment, analyze A, B, C, and then come back in and we'll see where we're at.
Yeah. I think that, to tie things to the slides, this second bullet point of financial pressure being strongly linked to sleep deprivation, all of this other stuff, I think that's something that we tend not to think about when we're in it. Like if we're struggling financially, we're spiraling. Like I know me personally, any time where I'm worried about my finances, I'm spiraling. Uh, there's there's moments where I'm in the moment and whatever, but there's always kind of this lingering, beast trying to get you in the background. And I think we don't appreciate the impact that it has on us mentally and on our decision making process, because it puts you in sort of a fight or flight response where you're thinking instinctively versus rationally. And to your point, small things like cutting out three plus cups of coffee a day is a huge impact on the budget, and it can really help somebody out. But if I'm in that situation personally, I need somebody to tell me to do that, because I'm not thinking that. I'm not in a place where I can think about that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I like your comment about the fight or flight, though. I mean, that really affects our central nervous system, where it really impacts the sleep, irritability, could cause mood changes. People might point things out and be like, hey, you don't seem like yourself lately. Is something going on? And it's this underlying financial stressor. So I liked your point about the kind of fight or flight nervous system could impact your appetite, sleep, really anything. And so I think that stress response is really important to manage and to notice within yourself of like, hey, I'm not like, you know, anyone like listening here, like, hey, I'm feeling kind of off today. I wonder what it is. Is it my financial instability or needing to feel more stable with certain things? So I like your point about that.
Thank you. I did have a question for you as well. How do you help clients who tie their self-worth, excuse me, to their financial status or income?
Sure. Yeah. For me, right, Aaron? Yeah, I can definitely
Yes.
answer that question for sure. Yes. That comes up a lot with the clients I work with. And I try to take two different approaches. One approach I like to take is something called acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT. The acronym for acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, is ACT. And what we look at are, what do you value in your life? We do this exercise where it's like a handout that we could work on together with just like 30 different values that you could value in life. And is money on there? Is income, is social status, income status, is that on there of something you value and like your top 2 or 3 high values in your life? What do you prioritize? So it could be anything from like family, friends, education, career, hobbies, travel, volunteering. What do you focus on day-to-day life? And so if I'm noticing my clients are really tying their confidence, their self-worth to financial status, their income, we try to redefine, what does success look like to you? What are some concrete steps on how you can achieve what success looks like? Because that looks different for everybody. You interview 5 or 6 different people and they all have a different version of what success might look like. And a lot of times people do emphasize financial status. So we try to figure out, what do you value and why do you value it? How does it come up in your life? And the second part I like to do that clients really enjoy is more of this narrative work or storytelling, where I might ask a question like, what was your early origin story of when you started learning about money? Or who taught you about finances? Was that when you were a kid? Was that when you were a teenager, in college, an adult? How did you learn to budget? Or have you, do you need to improve some of the strategies or skills? So these narrative techniques is what we call them in therapy. And basically I asked some prompting questions about discussing early childhood memories of money, or did you grow up with your parents fighting about money? Did your parents get divorced because of money? How were you exposed to money early on? And what did that look like in your family of origin? So I find a lot of patients think back and they reflect and they're like, oh yeah, like I didn't realize I grew up at 6, 7, 8 years old. We were talking about money then, or we were living paycheck to paycheck, or we were I didn't need to have a job because my parents set me up with money early on. Like, everyone has their own story. So exploring that is really useful in the work.
Absolutely.
I
And
absolutely agree with that.
And talking about marriage and your situation when you're younger, and your relationship with money when you're younger, I always find it a very fascinating topic that I feel like there's not enough research on. We just know the stat of, I think it's like 50% of marriages, if not more, when they file for divorce, money troubles is right at the top of their list. And to your point about having that conversation around money and status and finance, that is something that a lot of couples don't discuss. Like, I know a ton of my friends and family with their partners, they don't talk about money until things are really bad. And I think that's, for me, that's why it's so important to have a financial advisor, to have a specifically a trusted financial advisor, and to have a therapist, because they can help with that reconciliation. Because what I found is, it's really hard, in my experience, to get people who are uncomfortable talking about something to talk about it in a healthy way if they're uncomfortable talking about it in general. But what I have seen be very successful is if they can put their trust in that area in somebody else, then it becomes something where they can go, okay, I can continue kind of, for lack of a better word, I don't know if it's healthy or not. Please let me know if it's not healthy. But I can continue, not dealing with this so that I can deal with other things that I think are more important right now. And I can trust that this is being taken care of. That does bring me to another question that I think is so important, and that is, how should clients emotionally prepare for these conversations around mental health and around financial health, and the intersection of the two?
Sure. Should I take that one first, or
I'll let you. Sure.
Please.
No, that sounds good. No, something that comes up for me for this question. I love this question because a lot of people get anxiety. What you were speaking to reminded me of just how sometimes money is seen as taboo, just like therapies could be taboo for a taboo topic to talk about. Like people don't go around asking people how much they make or what their salary is. Like it's still kind of taboo in our culture. So how do you prepare to talk about this with meeting with a financial advisor? And I really love using something I'm pulling from the DBT handbook now, dialectical behavioral therapy, with my clients, where it's called coping ahead. I really love this strategy with my clients where it's this skill that we practice in our time together. It's where you mentally rehearse what you're going to do before you do the anxiety provoking event. So you really do, it's kind of a mindfulness. If you're into mindfulness and you like that, you basically imagine yourself, yes, like you imagine yourself doing the stressful event before you do it. You vividly imagine this trigger. So say you're nervous about talking to a financial advisor, you visualize yourself successfully doing it, and your brain gets primed to respond calmly rather than being triggered with this panic or intense emotion. So if you can imagine yourself doing something and you picture yourself doing it well, and you kind of rehearse it, you're more likely to do it well in the moment. And if you feel like you want to bring like a supportive friend with you, or practice with your therapist of questions that you want to ask the financial advisor. I also do that a lot with my clients, or if they're nervous about speaking to somebody, together we'll write a list of questions together, almost like a script, or like some bullet points of main topics that we want to talk about or that they want to discuss with their financial advisor. And if you're nervous about what to say, we practice it. We almost role play it ahead of time, so they're all prepared to meet with a financial advisor, and they feel more increasing self-efficacy, which is like the feeling that you can do something. So that self-confidence increases by practicing.
Yeah, and when the clients come in to see me, I always tell them ahead of time, you know, write down any questions that you have so that way you're prepared and you're not like trying to think of stuff at the absolute last minute. So we want to make sure, and also you can tell when they come in if something is off or it's not right, and if we should be working with them to help them invest. We want to make sure that they are in the right place. And if they don't seem like they're in the right place, you've got to come up with the right questions. But I can't say to them, well, I don't think you're ready to invest. You need to go speak to someone, because I can't do that unless I'm asked about it. But I try and assess that situation, and then try and do open-ended questions to try and figure out, where they're coming from, because they do have to be in the right mindset. And it is amazing the amount of clients that don't talk to each other about money and stuff. So when they're coming into the advisor, the wife might say something, the husband might say something, and then they'll look at each other. And then I'm sitting here like, okay, what do I do next? Because that just opened up a can of worms. So you have to really tread lightly and, make sure they are in the right mindset. And as far as the status of wealth or where you are, it's all relevant. You can make $1 million a year, but if you're spending $800,000 a year, you only have $200,000 left to do something. I can have a client that makes $200,000 a year, but only spends $100,000, and they have $100,000 left. So it's all relevant to where you're at. So you can be a millionaire in your eyes with $1 amount as opposed to another.
That brings me to something that I try to preach to my family, and I'm sure they're tired of me saying it, but I think that comparison is is an enemy to personal results. And I think that a lot of people, especially in terms of financial advice and therapy, they compare themselves to somebody else where it's not relevant, you know? Um, and like like I'll have, my cousin be like, oh, I make $60,000 a year, but I live in a neighborhood where uh, costs are pretty low, and I'm doing fine, but I want to make what my other cousin who lives in New York City makes, and have that lifestyle. And it's like, well, those aren't really comparable. There's a lot of things that are bolted on to those things that really don't make sense. And I think it also happens to I think a more subtle extent in therapy as well, or in mental health conversations, where you look at somebody who can handle public speaking, for instance, any random thing, and you kind of say, oh, I can't do that, I wish I could do that, and this is not, there's something wrong with me because I can't do that. But the reality of the comparison is that person, I promise you, is struggling with something else. That person is, you know, maybe has a fear of cars. I have met more than one person who has a fear of cars, but there's always another layer that you're not seeing when you're making those comparisons. And I think that's to reiterate the point, I think that's why it's so important to develop a trusting relationship with a financial advisor, with a therapist, um, so that they can kind of help you focus on you, because that's the important thing, is your own finances, your own mental health. And whereas, in my opinion, the other stuff can be very distracting and kind of derail you from your own progress. So I have another question for both of you. I'll kick it to Jeannie first, but what would you say that are early warning signs that you see that would indicate that one of your clients is kind of going um, into a high conflict or high stress position where they might not be as reliable in terms of quality decision making, and how do you mitigate that occurrence?
Well, it depends on the situation. If they call me and they say, I need ABC, say they want to take a large amount of money out, I first of all try and figure out why they need it. Is something going on? Because we're always on the lookout for fraud because there's a lot of it. And I mean, it hasn't happened to myself, but I've heard of other advisors who's had clients call and ask for money because they thought a grandchild was in dire need. So I always try and double check. I can't stop them from taking the money, but if I feel like there's something more going on, I can contact our field supervision people. We have a fraud department that can follow up with the clients on our behalf because they're trained for it. So I'm always on the lookout for anything like that, because if I see a pattern of money going out of an account that doesn't seem like the regular status quo, if you will, I'm going to call somebody and make sure somebody follows up. And it is hard to tell. It really is, because in some cases it's real need and it's really happening. But you have to really ask a lot of questions. But I'm always on the lookout for that. But now the fraud piece is really a big thing, and the AI, pretending there's somebody they're not.
I didn't even think about those aspects. That's a really good point. Dr. Skalski?
Yeah, I like that approach of asking a client a lot of questions. I tend to take that same approach where in my work with the early warning signs, what I'm on the lookout for is asking questions about like sudden mood changes. I'm asking about impulsivity. Are they making choices that they never used to make? Are their symptoms kind of coming back up right now where it's not allowing them to make good financial decisions or personal decisions? I also ask a lot of questions about like risky behaviors. I'm thinking of addiction or addictive behaviors. Are they engaging in substance use that might impair their judgment with finances? Or are they increasingly impulsively spending? Things like that stand out to me on the clinician side. And it depends on the level of insight for the client as well. Sometimes it takes a family member or a friend to point out like, hey, you don't seem like yourself. Is something going on? So if a client doesn't feel like they're changing that much or that they're not feeling as stable, sometimes a family member or friend might point out like, hey, I'm noticing something's going on with you. Maybe you should seek some support or maybe focus on some mental wellness lately. Things like that could be if you're noticing some sudden changes or disruption to mood. And I also like to ask a lot of questions during a client's kind of lifespan where if they're going through a lot of changes of life or stages of life changes, like I'm thinking relationship status changing, like a divorce, kids having babies or having kids moving out of the house, that would change financial status, retirement or loss of employment, loss of income, change in income, different kind of life stages of development or key milestones in life. I always like to ask a lot of follow-up questions about that because that might be an indicator that something might be happening that's changing in their life that we should check up on and maybe offer some extra support.
Very good points. Very good points. I want to be cognizant of time. I feel like we've just scratched the surface, but I want to wrap this up by asking the question what we can do as partners, as clients, as individuals, as people, what we can do about our financial health and mental health, and also what we can do about helping those around us. Because I know I personally get stressed out about family members and friends and where they're at mentally or financially and their situation. So yeah, final question. What can we do to set ourselves up and the people we care about up for success?
Now you're talking like our relationships, or are you talking working relationships like my clients or?
Yeah, oh, thank you. Uh,
Um,
well, I was talking about what we can what we can do as individuals, as clients, to help ourselves financially and mentally. But I do want to make sure that we give a moment to the question from Yvonne. What do you say to adult children who earn significantly more than you do, but are not really worried about financial planning? There's plenty of time. I'm young and I want to enjoy my 20s before I get married.
well,
That's a good
I have a
question.
perfect example for that answer. So when I first started doing this many years ago, I had a kid that came in. His parents had died, his grandfather raised him, and his grandfather told him that he needed to put money aside out of his paycheck every single week for himself. So he literally came in every Friday and brought in $25. That was it. He invested that $25 religiously to the point that he followed me here. He was able to put a deposit down on a house. So I would say even small amounts to start with, especially when you're young. $25, you can spend that in coffee in a week or at McDonald's on one day. Start small like that. At least you're not pushing them into something big. That's my opinion on that.
That's really good advice. Uh, Einstein called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world, um, because of how fast it builds up and builds to something significant. Dr. Skalski, anything to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, all good points. Just to kind of echo, I feel like with my clients, I just really try to do like monthly goals, 6 months from now kind of goals, yearly goals with clients, just to kind of help them get to be future oriented like that. And trying to help see where their locus of control is. Where do they feel like they have the power to make changes, or do they look for external locus of control, or they think that others make changes for me, or others are in charge of my life, I'm not in control of my own life? So I evaluate, I assess, where do they believe that that changes could be made? Is it within themselves? Is it within their system or their microcosm that they're living in? Their social network. So trying to do I pair it with goal oriented. Also, how do they feel? How confident do they feel in their ability to be able to make changes? And if I'm noticing that they're very present focused, kind of like the question in the chat said of, I just want to enjoy my early, my 20s before I do everything, they're very present focused. They may be having a hard time seeing the future. So we could ask hypothetical questions of like, where do you picture yourself 5-10 years from now? What would that look like? How do you set yourself up for success? So there's some prompting questions on the mental wellness side of what I could ask to kind of engage. Are they very present focused right now and wanting to enjoy their 20s before moving forward? Or are they thinking about how to set themselves up in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and what that might look like?
As somebody who's been the kid, I can also say that what has worked for me is small targets. Kind of like what Jeannie was saying. When I was in my early 20s, my parents were trying to get me to think about my future and where I was going and what I was doing with my life, and I was like, I'm just going to party. And looking back, the biggest thing that kind of derailed me in that conversation, or derailed the conversation, is that for me to think about, paying for a wedding or paying for a house or whatever, at that point in my life, that was a lot. And I didn't want to deal with it. There was a lot of other stuff going on and I was having a good time. But for me to think about, hey, just in case, because bad things do happen, set aside a slush fund. Put the $25 a week into a separate account. That would have been something that the younger me could have been like, okay, fine. If that's a middle ground that kind of gets you off my back about this, happy to do this. I think a lot of times as individuals, in so many things that we undertake, we have this goal, this ultimate goal, and we keep looking at that. And no matter how many steps forward we take, because it's so far away, it seems not worth it. And for me, what really works is setting the goal somewhere along the path to the ultimate goal and just focusing on that. Don't worry about the ultimate goal. You'll get there, you won't get there, whatever. But if you worry about it, it's just going to create stress. If you can just set targets to that, it's a lot easier, especially when you're younger and you're just trying to enjoy your life. It's a lot easier to digest that information and incorporate that into your day-to-day life. But thank you for the question. Great question. How do you change their minds, Dr. Skalski?
That's a great question. How do you change someone's mindset? How do you change someone's mind? How do you kind of facilitate growth, right? I get that question a lot. A lot of people think that therapy is like a magic wand where you kind of wake up and you feel better the next day, but it's definitely a process. My role is to kind of help ask prompting questions to kind of facilitate thinking. And so an example could be, I might ask, what behavior are you doing that you wish you could change? Kind of what Aaron was saying about how I think of it is chunking a goal. You chunk it into smaller pieces. So instead of thinking of what am I supposed to do for a year from now, that's so hard to imagine. What can I do this week? What can I do tomorrow? Make it a smaller goal to get to the target goal at the end. I also like to make sure I'm careful with the language I use as well with clients, where when we have an identified behavior, I don't say if the behavior is good or bad. I don't use good and bad as language or terms to describe a behavior because it's all relative. I usually use unhealthy or healthy, or helpful or harmful. So if a client comes to me and they're like, I really want to change XYZ behavior, how do I do it? How do I change my mindset around this? I say, well, is that helpful or harmful to your end goal that you want? Is that useful to you? Is that a stepping stone to get to the goal you want? And usually they're like, well, I don't think it's the best. Like you were saying, partying in your 20s and not setting yourself up for success, is that helpful or harmful? Do you think that's getting you towards your goal of wanting to be financially stable or buy a house or, whatever it is? What are some concrete steps you could take? Or, is this a useful behavior? Is this something you want to keep doing? Or do you feel like it's something you might want to modify a little bit? Because change doesn't happen overnight. And so we're very patient with walking with patients through this journey of change and kind of facilitating the growth. But, is this helpful, harmful? Is this getting you further away from your goal? Is this moving you towards your goal? So very goal-oriented type of language. And they'll change when they want to change usually. So usually people are on their own timeline, and my job is to help support them through it and hopefully point them in the right direction and kind of help guide them.
Yeah. The other thing that I want to add, I don't know how old your kids are, but I have found, and this is true even of adults, I have found that for whatever reason, people don't listen to the most readily available source of wisdom. They listen to the ones that they have to find, or that they have to set aside time for. Like I have a niece who her parents will say something to her 1,000 times, does not care. Just, so you're my parents. And my wife, her aunt, will say something to her once and it'll be the exact same thing. And she'll be like, oh, that's a really good point. So I can say, like, another thing about that is build a network, build a support system around you and also around the people that you're supporting, so that when they're not ready to listen to you, they might be willing to listen to somebody else. Yeah.
That's a good
So we, oh, go ahead.
timing. I would say timing is everything as well. You could say something today that doesn't resonate with somebody, and then you could say it again 3 months from now, and they're like, wow, that's the wisest thing I've ever heard, So I think timing, when people are ready to hear it or hear advice, I think that makes a difference too. So the network is so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've gone a little bit over, and I did want to kind of tie into what we can do. My biggest thing, and if either of you have something to contribute to this, by all means, please do. But I think all of us do ourselves and the people around us a huge service when we reach out, not just to companies like Edward Jones and LAMCO Wellness. Don't get me wrong, absolutely do reach out to Edward Jones and LAMCO Wellness, but also to each other. Let people know where you're at, let people know where your struggles are. It becomes a lot more manageable when it's out in the open, even though that part of it can be painful and tough to deal with. And then at least you can start finding the right path forward. And you can find people like Jeannie, like Dr. Skalski, who can give you advice to help keep you going and build momentum toward where you eventually want to be. So that's my biggest thing. If either of you have anything to add, by all means, please do.
No.
I think this was great. I think it's excellent. I think mental health and investing really do cross each other. You have to have the right mindset.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you so much for joining us and for your wisdom. Thank you as well to Dr. Skalski for the exact same thing. Well, not the exact same thing. It's wisdom in different areas. Anyway, but thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for joining us. And we'll see you around the bed.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.